The end of GameStop could be closer than anyone had ever previously thought, and it's not for the reason why many believed it would happen. GameStop has officially confirmed in a press release, which I will have linked in the description below if you want to go and read it for yourself, that quote, GameStop Corp today confirmed it is in exploratory discussions with third parties regarding a potential transaction. There can be no assurance any agreement will result from these discussions. GameStop does not intend to make any additional comments regarding these discussions unless and until it is appropriate to do so. End quote. There were previously rumors of this going around that GameStop was seeking a private equity buyout of their entire business operation, which includes GameStop, Game Informer, ThinkGeek, Simply Mac, and Spring Mobile. So GameStop has a lot of individual business ventures that may interest a lot of potential buyers. In case you have no idea what a buyout is, it is defined as a purchase of a company's shares in which the acquiring party gains controlling interest of the targeted firm. That definition is coming from Investopedia. So while a buyout definitely does mean that a change in leadership will occur, GameStop may continue on in some form even if sold. It could also mean, on the other hand, though, that a buyer might buy GameStop in order to control their assets. For example, a company or individual may be interested in the hundreds, if not thousands, of individual storefronts GameStop owns or leases across the country and in different countries around the world. They could also be interested in their gaming inventory. They could also be interested in their side ventures like Simply Mac, Game Informer, and different things like that. So there's definitely a lot of different ways to look at this and a lot of ways that it could unfold. We could also see the company split up into many different gaming retailers owned and operated by different individuals and companies. GameStop throughout the years bought up or drove out of business hundreds of locally owned or competitors' gaming stores. So if this were to happen, it would be almost like reversing the course of history and would allow for more competition, which would then be better for consumers. There are a lot of reasons behind the fall of the once mighty and unopposed GameStop. The main one, of course, being the rise in sales of digital games on console and PC. People are choosing the convenience aspect of just downloading a game online versus driving to a store and paying about the same price. Add in the bad press surrounding GameStop's several controversial policies and practices in the past, you can start to understand why the downfall of the US's largest gaming retailer is unfolding as soon as it is. Love 'em or hate 'em, GameStop has become a staple name in the video game industry. GameStop, no doubt, has less than a stellar reputation, especially in recent times, with many of the policies their employees are forced to follow. There's also a stigma around GameStop among gamers that they are known for ripping people off when you go in to trade in your used products, because most of the time they only offer you a little less than half of what they actually resell the game for. GameStop, despite its numerous negative elements, to which there are many, still served a critical and, personally in my opinion, crucial role in terms of buying and selling video games, especially in prior generations of consoles. There are very few places out there where you can bring in your used games, consoles, and accessories and walk out with either cash or store credit in a matter of minutes. This, to me, was the reason why I personally liked GameStop, especially when I was a kid. I was able to take in old games I didn't want to play anymore and trade those towards something new that I wanted. I understand that many people felt like they were being ripped off by GameStop trade values because they weren't exactly the highest around, but for me, I always liked the convenience of just getting my money for my games instantly versus trying to sell them directly over eBay, Craigslist, and other sites like that. So I think GameStop definitely had an important role because you knew if you walked into GameStop, chances are you would be able to find whatever game you were looking for, something you can't really say about a lot of other retailers out there, and at the same time you could significantly lower the purchase price by trading in what you no longer wanted, and I think that was something very special about GameStop because you could do it all in one transaction, and it really saved a lot of time and headaches of trying to kind of piece everything together, waiting for something to sell before you could go out and buy something else. So when I was a kid, that was amazing for me. Also, they were one of the only places you could find used games with a very fair return policy. that made sure you could return or exchange any game, console, or accessory that you bought that was not in proper working order. When I ordered from eBay or other secondhand sites, you didn't always get that guarantee. You didn't know if the game was going to work, and then when you got it and it didn't work, there was no returns on it, and that was a big problem. So this was something extremely important to me, especially in the previous console generations when Blu-rays were not used by companies and DVDs were very prone to scratch and be damaged. At the same time, buying it pre-owned from GameStop also offered you the opportunity to buy a game at a substantially lower price versus the new price, which was great for those who couldn't afford to buy new games. So I think that was definitely a positive aspect of GameStop. This was something I really took advantage of as a kid, since I didn't have exactly what you would call a steady income to support my hobby of gaming, and I love to play video games. So it was great to be able to go out and buy more games pre-owned because I could afford to do so. Despite all the criticism, I really do think GameStop did have a lot of positive roles that allowed it to actually offer value and convenience on the gaming market to consumers. It definitely had its place, and it had its advantages. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows when talking about GameStop, of course. They have definitely had their fair share of controversy and bad press, which is rightfully deserved in many cases. In recent memory, the Circle of Life program, which in some extreme cases caused employees to flat out lie to customers in order to meet certain sales quotas for that particular store, is one that comes to mind. The Circle of Life program forced each GameStop store to meet certain sales targets in pre-orders, reward card subscriptions, used game sales, and trade-ins. These targets were sent down from corporate, and employees that fell lower in any of the before mentioned targets would be at risk of termination, aka being fired. Out of fear of losing their jobs, some employees would even lie to customers about the availability of new products in order to try and convince them to buy the product used instead, in order to boost their sales in that category. This was shady, to say the least, and it is not a good look for a company that solely survives on its customers being able to buy what they want from their store. So why would GameStop want to do this? Why would they want their employees to lie to customers about the availability of new products? This is because GameStop makes much more money on the sale of pre-owned games, consoles, accessories, you name it, because the profit margins are much higher. That's the reason why most trade-in values at GameStop on games, consoles, and everything like that are below 50% of the actual pre-owned price that GameStop sells them for. It's to maximize their profits, because if you really think about it, they're almost making double the amount in terms of selling a pre-owned product versus selling its new counterpart. So that's why they have this constant push to sell pre-owned products. But this brings me to another huge criticism of GameStop and overall just selling used games in general that many feel hurts the entire gaming industry as a whole. That is the simple fact that the publishers, and more importantly the developers of the games, make absolutely nothing off the sale of pre-owned games when GameStop resells them to customers. The publishers only really make money off the initial sale of the new version of the game when you're talking about retail. This means that if somebody buys a used copy of a game after being convinced to do so by GameStop over buying the new version of the game, the publisher makes absolutely nothing from that sale. GameStop takes all the profit. This is why many people out there choose only to buy new or digital games so that they can support the developers of those games. In buying something used, you can often find a better deal, but at the same time, in a way, it's hurting the industry in a sense. Developers are getting less money than they're really entitled to. Some even suggest this is the reason why so many companies have moved towards DLC, microtransactions, and loot boxes in their games in order to subsidize this loss of revenue on used game sales. And while used game sales are declining and digital is increasing, I don't think it's the main reason for this shift in the industry of why many developers out there are making the decision to include DLC and microtransactions in their game. Personally, I still think the main driver of the decision to include microtransactions, whether they be loot boxes or cosmetic items or DLC in general, is the fact that it drastically increases profitability. Those oftentimes result in more revenue and profits for developers than the initial sale of the game itself. So that's definitely a reason why people may consider putting in microtransactions and DLC into their game, the fact that they are losing a lot of money off of secondhand sales, but I don't think it's the main reason behind it. So to be fair here, I do see the complaint here. Secondhand game sales do keep profits from the actual creators of the games, and GameStop being one of, if not the largest seller of used video games here in the US and in other countries they're present, you can understand why this is a complaint some people have. It does hold back money from the actual publisher and developer of these games. So that was just to name a few, okay? We could honestly go on for over an hour talking about the many different issues and complaints people have had with GameStop over the years. The downfall of GameStop, though, is something that many have speculated for a very long time. Ever since PC gaming primarily went to digital, there was always the question of when console would follow suit, and of course resulting in the irrelevance and subsequent closure of game stores like GameStop. Now with digital game sales growing year after year, the clock is ticking down for all physical games media, not just at GameStop but at all retailers. Many gamers, including myself, have opted for the ease of use and convenience that digital media provides, especially in regards to gaming. Let's talk about pre-ordering a game, something synonymous with GameStop. In terms of digital, you mostly can pre-download the game and have it unlock right at midnight and start playing the second the clock hits midnight, versus having to go to a GameStop midnight release, lining up a couple hours before, waiting in line for them to hand out the games at midnight. Then you have to get back in your car, you have to drive home, then you have to go inside, you have to install the disc, and then you have to download the day one patch. This can all take over an hour at the very least, depending on your internet speed, and that is just not as appealing to me personally as just having the game pre-installed on your Xbox, PlayStation, PC, or whatever, and just play the game when it unlocks at midnight. It's a much easier process, and that's why I really like pre-ordering things on digital now. So with the decline of all physical media, not just games, places like GameStop will most likely follow the exact same trend as Blockbuster and Movie Gallery did with movies. That is the natural progression of what appears to be happening. The only caveat to that being, of course, that I thought GameStop had at least another 5 years left in relevance, and they would kind of just die a slow but steady death. But it appears GameStop itself at this point recognizes they might be fighting a losing battle, and it's just time to go ahead and call it quits and get out before tragedy strikes. Who knows though? It could turn out that nothing whatsoever comes from these buyout talks, and GameStop will continue to operate as it has for the past decades, but just slowly shrinking in size and scope. Or the buyouts could result in a drastic change in restructuring of GameStop's business model and function. It's anyone's guess at this point, but one thing remains certain. It was bound to happen at some point. Let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comments section below. Are you sad at the prospect that GameStop as we know it may cease to exist in the next coming months or years, or are you of the mindset of goodbye and good riddance? Personally, I kind of hate to see them go because there are very few gaming stores out there, but at the same time, the business student side of me sees a company that has failed to evolve and adapt to the current climate of their industry and will naturally fail as a result. Like I said before, let me know your thoughts on this. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, or hit the dislike button if you didn't. Also, make sure to subscribe for future videos like this one, and make sure to turn notifications on by clicking the bell so you are notified every single time I upload a brand new video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.